Well, ladies and gents, you join me at the beautiful Barston Lake. I'm on the big lake today and I'm catching quite a few fish. It's been a really nice day. Strangely, no carp. I think the carp are down the other end of the lake. I've sat in the 80s on the grass bank in the 80s. Really, because I know there's been plenty of fish in this area. A lot of skimmers, a lot of F1s. And it's that which I'd like to talk to you about, fish location. And as soon as I've got this fish in, which I think is another skimmer, I'll talk you through something that I think a lot of people are neglecting slightly. We've got all fancy kit, got really nice modern baits. Obviously we've been out shooting other videos where we've talked about what bait to use, the flavourings, what hook bait's best, but if you cast out and you're not near any fish, you're not going to catch any no matter what you're using. So these are really nice fish today actually, even though they're skimmers, they're still nice fish. Cracking fish. So what I'm going to do is talk you through the kit I'm using briefly, but talk you through the watercraft side of fishing a feeder, because it's not just about chucking it out and hoping it goes round. Another cracking fish. Right, let's put him in the net, talk through the gear that we're using. Let's talk about the kit I'm using today. Now, it's all pretty standard stuff. Using a little hybrid feeder. You guys know, if you've watched any of my videos on method feeder fishing or hybrid feeder at this time of year, it's not about chucking a massive feeder out, sitting there waiting all day, boring the fish onto the hook. What I like to do is chuck a smaller feeder. I'm trying to set a trap for one individual fish. I'm not trying to build a peg. I'm trying to set a trap for one individual fish. To make a mistake, I can hook it far better if there's a smaller choice of bait to take around that feeder as possible. It's a little tiny hybrid feeder. I've put a short stem in the feeder and I've changed the elastic in that stem. I want something that's really nice and stretchy. I like this pink elastic from Midi. It's this pink shock core. It's tough as anything and it stretches for miles, which is great for getting the feeder away from a hooked fish when you're playing it. Hook length wise, because I'm catching a lot of skimmers and F1s today, I've gone for a 3-inch hook length. Still 0.18, so pretty strong, so I should land any carp that I'm going to hook. Size 12 hook. I've got a little bayonet there for piercing a wowser or wafter or whatever you want to call your semi-buoyant hook baits. The main line, I've got a 5-pound main line. A really light main line aids casting these light feeders massively. And obviously I want to make as small a plop as possible when I chuck this feeder into the water. I want to make as small a commotion as possible. And a light main line helps me chuck a nice small feeder. But obviously you're not going to chuck that on its own. So what we need is a shock leader. I don't want to ever be undergunned. I might have to put a heavier feeder on today. I might have to chuck it a bit further. So I don't want my shock leader to let me down. That's why I go for a 12-pound shock leader. I think there's no point going any lighter. You might as well just go all the way and go for a 12-pound shock leader. You just know you can give your cast a big one and you know it's never going to let you down. Rod-wise, I've gone for, this is my standard Barston rod. It's a free spirit carp feeder. It's 11 foot. It's great for chucking sort of 60, 70 metres. If you ever come to Barston, or if you fish Barston a lot, 60 metres on a lot of the pegs is halfway across the lake. So I see a lot of people with really stiff pokey rods. I like to do it with a slightly softer, shorter rod because I just think it helps me when I'm playing those skimmers and F1s. And let's get right, on this venue, those skimmers and F1s, as you've seen from that last fish I've just caught, they're really important. They're sort of like 3-pound average. So you might want to make sure that you land them all. So that's the gear sorted. As you can see, a pretty standard method feeder or hybrid feeder setup. What I'd like to talk to you about though is fish location. Where do you decide to cast your feeder? When do you decide to make a move? You know, how far do you move? All those little tiny things. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to load this back up, I'm going to chuck it out because I've waffled on long enough, and then I'm going to talk to you about where I'm casting and why I'm casting there. So folks, that last cast went about 65 metres. It's quite late in the session now, and that's not where I started fishing. I actually started fishing much shorter than that. When we talk about watercraft and fish location, it's the same whether you're fishing a pole or feeder or a waggler, a commercial fishery, a snake lake, a canal. It's all about managing your peg. The last thing I want to do is cast the maximum of my swim early on in the session and risk playing all my cards straight away and risk blowing the peg. What I want to do is work my way out as the session progresses. So take today for an example. Sitting on the grass bank here at Barston, I'd say in a match situation 70 metres is probably the maximum that you could chuck on this bank. The guys on the opposite bank could probably be chucking 70 metres as well by the end of the day, and we'd all be chucking in the same hole. So what I don't want to do is push all those fish over to that side of the lake. You've got to remember, obviously, we're using small feeders for a reason. Fish don't want bait at this time of year. They don't want big feeders crashing on them. They'll just back away from you. My first cast today was at 40 metres, and there's good reason for that. Firstly, I know that there's quite a few skimmers and F1s down this area of the lake. Secondly, I actually saw, it was such a small indication, but I saw a couple of bubbles pop up at about 40 metres just as I was setting my gear up. Now I like to set up my kit almost exactly the same, my seat box arrangement, my keep nets, my side trays. I like to set up my gear exactly the same on nearly every session that I fish, whether I'm pole fishing or feeder fishing, whatever I'm doing. And that means that I'm in autopilot when I'm setting up, and it means I can keep an eye on the water surface, I can look for any fish rolling, I can look for any signs of fish. Signs of fish, it's common sense. If you see some fish moving, you've got to have a chuck there. You know, where you see one fish at this time of year, there's often more fish. So if you see a fish roll, even if it's a tiny little fish topping, quite often the small fish hanging around with a big fish at this time of year, that's got to be a good starting point, or got to give you a good indication of where your next cast should be. So 40 metres has been my starting point today. You can tell it's late, the geese are coming in, look. 40 metres has been my starting point today. Now I think it's important to talk about size of feeder and more importantly weight of feeder that I've chucked. So I want to make as small a commotion on the water surface as possible. Noise, load of bait, all it's going to do is risk spooking those fish. And if I can catch one or two fish extra out of a little space before having to make a move, that is ideal. So I've used the 18 gram hybrid for my first chuck at 40 metres. And then as the day's gone on, I've obviously upped the weight of the feeder so I can get a bit more casting distance. So I'm on a 30 gram at the minute. When to move and how far to move is obviously critical. So on a day like today, when I'm getting quite a few bites from skimmers that like to hang around in a certain area, the moves are quite small. I might maybe move after every couple of fish, I might move a couple of metres, just creep out and gradually work my way out to that sort of like 65, 70 metre mark where I want to end the session. But if I was catching bigger fish, the F1s in Barston and the carp in Barston in particular, this time of year don't really want to settle over a load of bait, then the moves might be bigger. So a 5 metre move or a 10 metre move, if you're not getting bites, the move needs to be much bigger. As a general rule, if you're getting bites, small move. If you're not getting a bite at all, you need to make a bigger move. How I manage those moves is by using the line clip. So when I first cast out, I slip the line under the line clip and then mark the line in front of the reel with one of these, a little line marker pen. It wears off after maybe 4 or 5 casts, but it's not really important that, because I'll be marking the line as the session goes on at several points, just using it as a loose visual reference point. So I know that when a fish takes the bait here, sometimes the bites can be really savage from carp or F1s, the tiptoes round, you're hanging onto your rod. I'll need to unclip. What I don't want to do is just second guess where that feeder landed the last time and when I recast. So when I've netted that fish, I'll either make a false cast to that line marker, or if I'm feeling particularly cocky, as I'm winding the fish back in, when I reach the line marker, I'll probably slip the line back under the line clip, and that readies me then for the next cast. Something I always like to do is if I've caught a fish from an area, you've got to have a cast back there, because you might have just stumbled on a pocket of fish and you might end up fishing there all day. But the likelihood is you might catch a couple of fish from an area and then you've got to move again. Now, the most important time of any winter session is the last half hour. What I don't want to do is be at my maximum distance before that time. I don't want to play all of my cards before I get to that last half an hour. That could be my only time for a bite. And if you put everything together, the time of day being perfect, the setup being perfect, your bait being perfect, and then your casting distance or the casting area that you cast to being perfect, you know, you're going to get a bite. And that could be your only bite of the day in the winter. So I always leave that last half hour in reserve. If I'm casting 65 metres at the minute and I've got half hour left of the session, I'll probably give it a really big one later on and maybe try and go 70, 75 metres, something like that, just to get into virgin water, some water that no one else has touched during the day, where those fish have probably backed off to, and you just know that that's your best chance of a bite in the winter.